this week's episode of the Red Delta Project podcast, I'm going to be sharing with you some of my best tips to maximizing your lower body strength and capability using nothing more than the weight of your own body. Hello there, my name is Matt Schifferly. I'm an inventor, author of books like Smart Bodyweight Training, and of course founder of the Red Delta Project, which is your resource for simple and efficient diet and exercise tips that are meant to not only enhance your health and fitness, but also your quality of life. One of the best ways you can do that, of course, is building really strong, capable legs. No matter what goal you want to accomplish, from weight loss to building muscle to sports performance or just getting rid of aches and pains, getting your legs strong and capable are possibly the best thing you could ever do for yourself. But I recognize a lot of people are very skeptical when it comes to lower body training, especially with body weight stuff. Even calisthenics guys out there will say, yeah, dips are awesome, pull-ups are great, but when it comes to the lower body, you gotta get a leg press. You gotta have a lot of weight on a back squat or something. And I certainly had this opinion for years myself, until I seriously gave progressive calisthenics a try. And you can imagine my surprise over the course of the next several months, the area of my body that improved the most by far was my legs. I'd been back squatting for years. Leg press, I was always on the leg press come leg day and stuff. But the progressive calisthenics for the lower body was by far more effective. But I don't blame people for being skeptical about it, because there's a very pervasive element within our society that is holding a lot of lower body training back, even with weights. And this element is something that I call the cast of sitting. I mentioned this in my book if you want more details on it, but here's the long and the short. It's no secret that we're sitting a lot these days. And a lot of experts are like, sitting is the new smoking, and we've got our standing desks and everything. But the bottom line is we're largely held immobile in our lower body and our posterior chain for long hours at a time. And this is exactly the same thing as when we have a cast or immobilizing a limb due to an injury. And if you've ever had like your arm in a sling or a cast, it's no secret that when that cast comes off, that arm is weaker, it's stiffer, and it's less stable. So the next thing to do, of course, isn't to go take a boxing class, because that would be very irresponsible and you just hurt yourself. It's to get some physical therapy to build your strength back up, to build your mobility and your stability, and then you can ease into your normal activities. Well, our habits of sitting for long periods of time are doing the exact same thing for our legs that having a rough cast is doing. They're weaker, they're stiffer, they're less mobile. So naturally, if you put someone into some really intense lower body calisthenics training, one of two things is going to happen. One, they're probably going to get sore, achy, and injured because they don't have the stability, they don't have the tension control, they don't have the mobility and the strength. So of course they're going to get hurt. So that's when you get a lot of people saying pistol squats are bad for the knees, lunges are bad for the knees, all of this sort of thing. The other outcome that often happens is people say it's not adequate enough. And this still goes back down to the cast of sitting, because we've been sitting for so long that even our conventional methods of strength training for the lower body when it comes to weights have adhered within the confines of sitting. You even hear it a lot of times when people talk about lunges and squats. They say squat as if you're sitting back into a chair. And we've created all of these rules like don't let the knees go past beyond your toes, sit way back, make sure you don't go below parallel, don't bend your knees more than 90 degrees and all this sort of thing. And what this does is if you look at it, it means we're now moving as if we're still sitting, as if we're still sitting back into a chair and using our body the same way. And this, arguably, people say, well, this keeps you safer. And you bet it does. Because it's like having a cast on your arm and saying, well, keep your arm in that position to keep it safe. It will be safer until you need to use your arm outside those confines. And that's what ends up happening is people will say, as long as I keep myself moving within this confined range of motion and using my legs in this specific narrow way, then I'm fine. And as a result, we say that way until we take a funny step off of a curb or we take a funny jump off of a ski hill or something, and we end up hurting ourselves. But one of the biggest disadvantages to the cast of sitting is that when we move ourselves within the confines of it, it's not very challenging. It's actually fairly easy. So the only way we can adequately strengthen our muscles and work them is to use a crap ton of weight, which is where that idea comes about, that you need a lot of weight. You need a heavy leg press. You need a lot of weight on a barbell and all this sort of thing. Because if you're going to move within the confines of sitting, you're going to need to use a lot of weight. And there's no getting around it. So when people jump into bodyweight training and they carry those rules across from the confines of sitting and the cast of sitting to bodyweight training, they find it's woefully inadequate. And then you get that other common belief that, oh, it's not very effective. It can't adequately train your legs. Now, when I started to do bodyweight training for my lower body, I broke out of that cast of sitting. The rules no longer applied to me as far as I was concerned. So I was using a lot more mobility, a lot more stability. And funny enough, I was also requiring myself to use a crap ton more strength. And that's why my legs got so much better from bodyweight training than they ever did with weights. And this isn't just rules that apply to bodyweight training. If I ever got back into weightlifting, I'd use these same rules. And I would use as little weight as possible. Because what these rules do is they make the exercises harder from a technical perspective rather than external resistance. The belief I've come across over the years and developed is that weight is a liability while technique is an asset. And it's not the most popular attitude, I admit, because nobody likes to be the guy who's like comparing numbers in the gym and it's like, what are you up to now? And you're by far the lowest number. But that's the attitude I have now. People ask me all the time, how much can you do for the squat? How much can you bench? And to be honest with you, I had no idea because it's been nearly a decade since I've done any training on these things. How the hell would I know? But if I ever got back into weightlifting, my answer would be the same, as little as possible. I want to use as little weight as possible and make the technique as hard as I can from a technical perspective, because this is the grind style approach. The grind style calisthenics. We make it harder through technique, not just weight, because weight can be a liability while technique can be an asset. Whereas when you put a pound of weight on your body, that creates resistance through your body against gravity. And that resistance can either build you or it can break you. But that resistance is going to be there no matter what. The only thing that's causing the difference between build or break is your technique and your tension control. And of course, technique and tension control can change under different circumstances. It's not always a sure thing. So that's why I see it as a liability. It's something that can potentially break you down. It can hurt you. And the only thing standing between you and hurt is technical proficiency. But when you have your resistance created by technical proficiency and you do things the hard way, now you have that buffer because you're doing things the hard way technically. And if you get tired or if you're having an off day or your concentration's not very good, you just won't have the technique to make it hard enough. You can't make the resistance hard enough, and therefore it's kind of a bit of a buffer in safety. So that's long and the short why I've come to that perspective myself. So the question then is, how do you do that? How do you do it? Let's talk practical application. Well, the two lower body exercises that you're going to have the most success with for building up your legs are squats and lunges. The squatting motion, if you will, the squat chain, as I discuss in my book. Squatting is very simple. We overcomplicate it way too much. Think about it this way. Here's the best way to think about squatting. You've got your hip joint, you got your ankle joint, and in between is your knee joint. When you squat, bring your hip joint closer to your ankle joint. That's the way I think about squats. Lunges, same thing. Lunges are basically squatting motion. Same basic exercise. It's basically a single leg squat. It's just the back leg is there to support and give you a little bit of assistance. But bring your hips closer to your ankles. That's it. That's all you need to really think about with the squatting technique is get your hips as close to the ankle as possible. This will require maximum strength in every muscle in your lower body. It will also require maximum mobility in every joint in your lower body. Your ankle, your knee, and your hip. Lots of people tell me, they're like, dude, my ankles are so stiff, I can't squat very deep, I can't lunge very deep. And that's, again, the cast of sitting right there. We're tight, we're stiff, we can't get very low. And as a result, we don't have the resistance to strengthen our muscles. So a lot of folks, when they get into bodyweight training, they'll find that their mobility or their stability is often the lacking factor. And that's why you get a lot of folks saying, oh, lunges or Bulgarian split squats or pistol squats or whatever, that's a mobility exercise or that's a balance exercise. That's not going to build strength. And they're absolutely right, because it's not going to help you get stronger because you've got a weak link in the chain. But that's the neat thing about chain training that I also talk about. RDP fans know what I'm talking about, chain training. The great thing about chain training is it works multiple muscles and multiple assets at the same time. And it's always going to go after the weakest one first. So if you're doing push-ups and you feel in your triceps, that means your triceps are the weak link. If you're doing lunges and you feel it in your hamstrings, that means your hamstrings are the weak link. Or you feel like it's balance exercise, means your stability is the weak link. But a lot of folks will turn tail and run at that. They'll be like, no, this isn't what I want. I don't want to work this. I want to work some other thing. So they'll abandon it, not knowing that once they get that weak link strengthened, then they'll work on the next weak link and the next and the next and the next. And pretty soon they won't have any weak links at all. And they'll just have that complete total conditioning and strength that makes a huge difference. So if you're thinking, I want my quads going crazy, but I don't feel it with these deep lunges, it's all in my glutes, then screw this. But what they don't know is that their glutes are actually the key to building up their strength in their quads. The weak links are holding them back. So they'll run to the leg press or the leg extension or something and say, I need this to be the thing that to build up my quads. Meanwhile, they're still not addressing the weak link, and it's an endless cycle that holds them back in check. This is not just leg training. This is just general progressive calisthenics theory as a whole. So what I recommend is practicing leg training on a very frequent basis, daily if you can. And I know this runs counter to a lot of folks like, oh, you got to get 24 hours, 48 hours, especially with leg training. It's so intense and stuff. But the thing is, a lot of us, we don't have the volume to reverse the cast of sitting. We don't have the high enough reps. We only do a couple of sets 2 or 3 times a week. If that, it's not nearly enough. So I recommend taking the time to get into deep squats on a daily basis. Now with lunges and squats, I do also recommend using upper body support and stability to get into this sort of thing. Because stability is also a factor for a lot of folks, which largely comes from the hips. And I'm a big fan of using something you can hold on to. Some sort of like a sturdy, like a fence post, or door frames work really well. Suspension trainers are a good option, but that's a good way to ease your legs into it while allowing your upper body to handle some of the strength and stability and allowing you to give the mobility. So it's a different approach from a lot of other folks, and a different approach certainly with weighted training, but hang on to something and practice really deep squats. Practice really deep lunges. Remember, all you got to do is get your hip closer to your ankle. That's all you got to do. Hip closer to the ankle. Take the 2 points, bring them closer together. That's your number one goal with all of your leg training. That's going to maximize the range at every joint, the strength at every muscle, and of course your stability as a whole. So start off with deep squats. Then you start bringing your knees closer together for close squats with your feet and knees close together at the same time. And then you can stick one leg out and you're starting to work on that coveted pistol squats, or the leg is behind you and you have shrimp squats. You're basically squatting on one leg. Again, requires a lot of mobility, requires a ton of stability in order to build that strength. Strength is usually the easy part of this equation. But a lot of us don't have the mobility and stability to build the strength we need. So you're probably going to find that it's a stability exercise for a bit, or a mobility exercise for a while. That's perfectly fine. Let those areas get strengthened up, because once they do, you're going to find that they're one of the best strength exercises you can have. What else can we cover here? Pistol squats. Usually this is coveted as the massive, the best way to go about it when it comes to lower body training. But I got to tell you, lower body training, pistol squats are great, but there's a lot harder out there, folks. First of all, with pistol squats, usually people have their arms out in front of them. You want to make pistol squats harder? Bring your hands closer to your chest. Again, more strength, mobility, and stability is required to do this. So if you think you're strong in pistol squats, cross your arms over your chest. If that's hard, even possible, have your hands behind your chest, or prisoner pistol squats where your hands are behind your head. That's a whole nother level of difficulty. You can also mix it up a little bit. Have one arm holding onto something in front of you, the other hand across your chest. That's going to make it more difficult as well. Or you can hold onto something, but you have your hands closer to your chest with the pistol squat. One of the most humbling moments I ever had was I thought, well, I'm going to try pistol squats on this Smith machine. And it was one of these ones where the bar was assisted. So the actual resistance created by the bar was like maybe 5 pounds. So I put the bar like across my chest, like I was holding it clutched tight to my chest. And I was like, okay, I'll get a set of 10. I got 1. And it was blood, sweat, and tears, swearing like a sailor to get 1 rep. It was my max. I was like, what the hell is this? Simple. It's because everything was tight to the chest. Nothing was out in front of me. It was tight to the chest. That was much more difficult. Shrimp squats are another squat variation. This one is one hand and one leg is behind you, kind of like when you grab your leg behind you to give yourself a quadricep stretch. Same kind of deal. And then you squat down on the front leg. Knee touches the floor behind you or right behind the ankle. Then you stand back up. Shorter range of motion, but it's very difficult because you got all that weight behind you. You want it even harder? You do it on a step. And this is called a jumbo squat, jumbo shrimp squat rather. So now you do it on a step so your back leg can sink below the ankle. Very difficult. Usually done with one arm out in front of you. Again, to bring you a little bit of weight in front, make it a little easier. But you're still looking for more challenge? Then you can bring your arm back across your chest. I don't know anybody who can do that. Seriously, I think there's like 5 people in the world who are capable of doing that. And then people are like, well, I'd want to do some weighted pistol squats. Sounds great to me. Go for it. No problem. You can add some external weight. But I'm always telling people, have the weight across your chest. Use a weight vest. Use something like hold a plate with one arm across your chest. You're going to find like 10 pounds. That's going to be a lot more resistance. It's going to be very, very, very difficult. What other points can we bring up? Real quick, some hips and calves, some shotgun muscles, if you will. Calf raises, awesome exercise. You can progress it just like the squats as well. Don't have anything in front of you. Don't be leaning forward on things. And tense up your entire leg as well. Glutes, hamstrings, quads. Treat it like an entire leg exercise. You're just moving at one joint. Instead of trying to work one muscle, work all of the muscles in the lower body. Just move at the one joint for your calves. Same thing with your hips. Leg raises, lift the leg straight out in front of you and then slightly to the side and back to work your hips. You can move your upper body a little bit, but try to keep your other leg rock still. Actually, lock out both legs. Just lock them out, completely locked out. You'll find that it's very challenging for your hips, but it's a very crucial exercise because you can only be as strong as your legs and your legs can only be as strong as your hips. So I always give people this leg exercise. I've got exercise. If you search hip exercises on the Red Delta Project YouTube channel, you'll find examples of it. And again, practice. What should you do for practice? Well, I'm a big fan that we've got to train our legs daily. Every single day, doing some sort of squatting, lunging motion to build up that stability and mobility and counteract the cast of sitting. We need it on a daily basis. This doesn't mean your leg training needs to be hard every day, because remember, you don't need to recover from exercise. You only need to recover from fatigue. So if your leg training isn't always fatiguing, then you can do it every day, and which I do highly recommend. Just a couple sets, light sets, deep lunges, just kind of warming up, maybe first thing in the morning, does wonders for you. But do have hard leg training 2 to 3 times a week. 3, maybe 5 sets of using some of the progressions I talked about here. If you want to know more about these progressions, though, check it out in Smart Bodyweight Training. That's much more detailed. It talks more about the cast of sitting and maximizing your lower body conditioning through bodyweight training. But again, it's something that is wildly misunderstood and not explored nearly as much, but it is possible. And it can be extremely rewarding because strength alone isn't enough. You've got to have mobility. Mobility isn't enough. You've got to have stability. And one of the best ways to build all 3, of course, is progressive lower body calisthenics training. Hopefully I gave you some things to think about. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. If you're listening on YouTube here or reddeltaproject@gmail.com. Love hearing from you. Don't forget, check out my books on Amazon. There's links on my website, reddeltaproject.com. But also, thank you very much for all the reviews on Apple, Stitcher, and Google Play. Helps us out a lot, and it helps other people find it as well. I will talk to you guys next week. Till then, be fit, live free.